Parsha Tazria, discuss a critical, really important message that literally makes a difference between whether we go through life happy or depressed. Mishal Salanter is the father of the Musar movement. It was the movement to introduce the teaching of ethics into the yeshivas. It was actually, back a couple hundred years, it was actually highly controversial. Today it's the standard in every yeshiva. You'll see bookshelves where they have works that are focusing on character development, ethics, standard books that are studied in every yeshiva. In fact, they make a time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day that you study. But when this was introduced, it was very controversial. Actually, there was communities that were split apart and yeshivas were broken into two because there were those that felt that, all you need is to study Torah. From Torah, you can create your own ethical system, moral system. You don't need to study ethics in and of themselves. There was a big debate at the time. But he points out something fascinating. He says that at the end of last week's Parsha, we have the kosher animals and the non-kosher animals, what you're allowed to eat and what you're not allowed to eat. This week's Parsha, it begins with childbirth and various laws of tumah and Hara, purity and contamination. And then it leads into, which is going to really take us for two parshios, the laws of tzaras. And the Medrash actually states that why are the laws of the animals being discussed before the laws that concern the human being is that it's to teach humility. The same way as in creation, the animals were created for man, that man, you start thinking about that you're hot stuff. Remember, the flea was created before you were. The Medrash says that even the yatush, the mosquito, is created before you are. And so to here, the laws of the animals, the Medrash says, are discussed before the laws of that apply to man. I think Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says something interesting. He says as follows. I believe this is this idea. I know that the Kotzker Rebbe is very sharp. The Kotzker Rebbe says that, the world would be a better place if we as Jews would be just as concerned as what goes into our mouth as what comes out of our mouth. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that you learn the laws of kashrus, you learn all the laws of what you're allowed to put in your mouth. Now you have the laws of tzaras, the laws of, it's not actually the translation of leprosy is not a correct translation. The Shamshon Raphael Hirsch has a whole thesis showing that there's no connection between leprosy and what we call in Torah as tzaras. Tzaras is actually, it's a spiritual malady that has a physical manifestation. In fact, today, because the level of Bnei Yisrael is on such a lower level, we're impervious to this spiritual sickness, that manifestation. We're not impervious to the effects of tzaras, but in terms of the physical, that doesn't even exist today anymore because leprosy exists. But these halachas, it's not something that is contagious and connects in the same way. He has his whole thesis, but our sages see a direct correlation between Loshon Hara, between, translated evil speak. In fact, the word mitzora, our sages say, is motzi ra. Mitzora, the one who has this sickness, is motzi ra. It's from saying negative speech. So again, but you have this correlation between kashrus, what's going in our mouth, and then how we have to purify ourselves and elevate ourselves by being careful about what's coming out of our mouths as well. But I want to share with you just an insight into Loshon Hara. I think this, as I said, I think it's a critical insight. The Psukim tell us that there's different types of Loshon Hara, of tzaras. There's tzaras that affects the person's body. There's affecting the clothing, the scalp. There's even the house. There's a house. The next week's part, we're going to learn about a house that gets tzaras. I mean, there's different forms of it. But on the body, it's fascinating that what happens is there's a part of the flesh, the visible part of the flesh that is affected, and there is this lesion, or this, it has in it a white spot. And the Psukim say that if you have the complete, a healthy body, all the healthy skin with this one spot that's damaged with this, that's considered to be tzaras. However, let's say a person wakes up one morning and he's completely covered with these white spots. So that's just a skin affliction. That's not tzaras. That's not reflecting that this person has tzaras. This person doesn't have to go through the purification process. That's not tzaras. It's the Chafetz Chaim, Yisrael Meir, a Cohen Kagan, lived at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. He wrote the Mishnah Brura. His name is Chafetz Chaim. Why is he called Chafetz Chaim? Because his main focus, especially in his ethical works, was on speaking of Loshon Hara. And it's based on the verse, Mia Isha Chafetz Chaim, anyone who desires life, Ohev Yamim, and he desires to live, he loves life. It says, Netzar Lashon Chameira, safeguard your tongue. So Chafetz Chaim, the one who desires, he wrote a book on Loshon Hara called Chafetz Chaim, and that name got stuck with him, that he's called the Chafetz Chaim. It was really the greatest sage of the end of the 19th century. And he has actually ArtScroll now have translated into, you can learn a lesson a day on the laws of Loshon Hara based on his a little booklet that people read. It's called A Lesson a Day. They're very important because the laws of Loshon Hara are so complex and intricate and just affect us every time we open our mouths. And so he asked the question, if one spot is tzaras, then kal vachomer, all the more so the entire body. Right? So I believe he wants to suggest, I think what he says is that a person that has been so visibly affected that is such a humbling experience, he doesn't have to go through the process. It's like the correction is built into the malady because of the extent of how he was affected. I think that's the answer he goes. I want to share with you, I think, a beautiful insight from my own Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Yochanan's why. It means why should there be if it's one spot, yes. Not all body, no. That's the question we're trying to have. The other question I'd like to address as well is that the notion of punishment, we've discussed multiple times. There's consequence involved, there's punishment, but punishment in general, this is very important for us as educators and especially as parents. it has to be corrective in nature. Now, corrective, there's different ways of how to correct when one is punishing. But critical is that the punishment, we always say punishment has to fit the crime, but it's more than just fitting the crime. It has to give an insight into what the problem is. You know, back in the day, when I was growing up, okay, you did something wrong, stay after class and write 1,000 times on the board, I should not do it. No one does that anymore. Why? Because it's ridiculous. That just means, because I did something wrong, now you're causing me discomfort. You're making me waste my time. But it has nothing to do with correcting the problem or giving me an insight into what I have that's problematic, that is causing me to act the way I'm acting. Right? We understand God's punishment, and all punishment should be midah keneged midah. Midah keneged midah means, in Latin the lawyers use quid pro quo. What's quid pro quo? Meaning measure for measure. Right? It has to not only measure and fit the crime or the misbehavior, but it should somehow give an insight or have some corrective idea. So what is the idea that a person speaks Loshon Hara and he gets the spot in his body? Right? Now, part of the process, the purification process, is for sure corrective. That we understand. What does he have to do? He has to go outside of the camp. He can't stay in the city. Right? He's acted in antisocial behavior. He's created a situation where he's created a toxic environment within the community. He needs a timeout. It can't be, you're antisocial, you fix your problem, I can't keep you here. That we understand. So the process in terms of the purification process, we understand. But the actual punishment itself that leads to that, the spot that he gets on him, we're trying to figure out what's the insight over there into... The Medrash says, it's actually going to be in coming up, we'll talk about in next week's Parsha as well, that part of the purification process, he goes outside, comes back and shows the Kohen, and Kohen says it's getting better, not getting better, quarantine for a certain amount of time until it gets, but in the process, once it seems that the malady is clearing up and has gone away, he has to bring 2 birds. Slaughters one bird, dips the blood of the slaughtered bird onto the wing of the second bird, and the second bird flies away. And what the symbolism in that is, we've discussed in the past, and maybe we'll deal with it later. But the Medrash says a very interesting thing. It says, why does he have to bring 2 birds? Why does the Metzorah have to bring 2 birds? So the Medrash says, one for his Loshon Hara, and one for his Lashon HaTov. One for his negative speech, and one for his positive speech. The birds are an atonement for both. So obviously it needs what does that mean even? Meaning, I understand the one for the negative speech. What does it mean that he also has to bring a bird for atonement for his positive speech? So that's another question we have to understand. Just understanding Loshon Hara itself and the insidious nature of it, the Talmud says that the 3 sins that the world was destroyed because the 3 sins, not the world, I'm sorry, that the first base of Mikdash was destroyed because of 3 sins: murder, shvichas damim, gilui arayos, that is sexual indiscretions, adultery, whatever falls under the idea of gilui arayos, and avodah zarah, idol worship. These are the 3 cardinal sins. These are the 3 sins that even if your life is on the line, you have to give up your life for. Talmud says that Lashon Hara is equal to all 3. So we're talking about, not in terms of punishment per se, because it's not a cardinal sin, you don't get executed for Lashon Hara, but it must mean the impact and the damage that it has upon the person or on the community is equal, if not greater, in impact than the three together. It's a huge statement. Understand what is so severe about Lashon Hara. The Chavetz Chaim himself categorizes, and he goes through, there's multiple, 30-some violations when a person speaks Lashon Hara, and he categorizes them. But he does make a distinction between if it's the truth or if it is slander, it's a falsehood. And he actually says under the penumbra of Lashon Hara is only when it's the truth. You're saying the truth is Lashon Hara. Slander, when you're saying falsehood, that falls under Motzi Shemra. It's another category of evil speech. But the one that's worse, and the one that got the multiple violations, and the one that we're talking about that Saras is associated with, is Lashon Hara, which when it's true. So how could be telling the truth be worse than slander? It's difficult to understand. I guess the way to begin understanding the effects and what the damaging effects is of Lashon Hara is really trying to come to grips with how it works in our 21st century. You know, we have this whole thing now about fake news. Right? Everyone's going on about fake news. Right? Fake news wouldn't be Lashon Hara. Fake news would be Motzi Shemra, right? Slander, making things up, things that are. But Lashon Hara is actually today in the 21st century, you know, the press and so on. We strive for Lashon Hara, freedom of press. To try and suppress truth today, that's anti-American. Right? Our founding fathers, liberty, the freedoms, that freedom of speech is the core of what it means to be an American today. And yet, what is Lashon Hara? Lashon Hara is suppressing the truth. You can't speak Lashon Hara. How does that gel with the notion, the importance of freedom of speech? It doesn't have to. We're not obligated. But I'm just saying, it's so alien to us. If you think about the Lashon Hara is the truth, and we strive for freedoms of speech, how does that, So why is, if it's true, worse than when it's not true? But why, if it's true, are we supposed to suppress? There's many issues today, even in the Orthodox community, that we're working on because sometimes we suppress the wrong things. Certain information that should not be suppressed, that should be reported. We're mandated reporters, we have to protect. We should not be suppressing. And the Chavetz Chaim goes through all the laws about when is something l'to'eles, when is it constructive that the truth should be told. But in general, Lashon Hara is very. It's one of the worst things that a person can do. We do it so much. The Talmud says that certain aveiros affect percentage of the Jewish people. Theft more than even sexual indiscretion, but it's a Lashon Hara affects everybody. That's something that's. So let's get a clear definition. Let's go through just the questions again. We're trying to figure out what the midah keneged midah, the quid pro quo of that dot on your skin. Why is if you're completely covered in this white, in these white lesions, that's not Lashon Hara, that's just a skin defect, but it's not. Why only one with the midah keneged ma? What's the message God is teaching us? Quote pro from speaking Lashon Hara. Why is Lashon Hara so bad? It's worse than if it's Motzi Shemra. What does the Medrash mean? You got to bring two birds, one for Lashon Tov, one for Lashon Hara. What's speaking for that? And how in today's day and age do we understand suppression of truth is really a good quality. So let me give you the following scenario. I think it'll become a little clearer. You turn on CNN, if you still watch CNN, right? And they show you a clip of an Israeli soldier hitting a Palestinian over the head with a baton. And this becomes the 5-second clip that now is cast around the world to reflect Israeli occupation brutality. The problem is, they only showed you that clip. They didn't show you the 10 seconds leading up to that clip where the fellow threw a rock and took out the eye of a soldier. They just showed you the reaction, gets hit over the head with a truncheon, with a baton. But the fact that he didn't show the rock, they don't show the rock being thrown that blinded someone, wasn't there. What have we done? There is truth. You showed something that's true, right? But you have not really given the reality of the situation. Context plays a big part in how truth is submitted. Because the message would have been a different message had you shown all 15 seconds. But you choose to create a false reality by using the truth. And that's the worst thing that can be done. Why is that the worst thing that can be done? Because if you're broadcasting false or fake news, it's true, it does create a certain impact and has people now have that sense of reality in their mind. But it's a lot easier to disprove. When you're using falsehood, you can disprove false. Something that's a lie that can be true. When you're using the truth to do that, that's very hard to disprove. Now let's explain, therefore, what Loshon Hara is. We as human beings are a confluence of many attributes. We do many things that are positive. We also have certain attributes that are negative. We also do certain things that are not necessarily the best thing to do. What a person that is a Baal Lashon Hara, a person who has mastered speaking Lashon Hara, is able to do, he hones in on the negative. He's able to pick out that negative attribute, that one action that was done was negative. And what he does, therefore, by creating a focus on it, he's now redefined the person that he's speaking about. And that from now on, moving forward, whenever we think about that person, the context that he's created, the reality, the false reality is created, is all defined by that one negative experience, by that one negative attribute. So what Loshon Hara does, it uses the truth to distort the reality, because you're taking the truth out of context. That is the worst thing you can do, because you've now destroyed the reality of the person using something that's true. It's almost impossible. How do you fight that even? You said a lie, you slandered me, I'll take you to court, I'll disprove it. You said something that's true. It's very hard to disprove. It's very hard to disprove. The midah keneged midah, I heard this from Rosh Hashiva, it's brilliant. You have this healthy body, all the skin is healthy, everything is okay. What does God do? It's a little blemish, a little spot. You know what that little spot now does? Your whole body becomes tameh. You have to go outside of the camp, you have to go to the Kohen, you got one little spot. Just one little spot. What's the problem? One little spot. You know what? You did the same thing. It's teaching you what you did. You took a whole person, you focused on the one little spot. You found that one little blemish. You found that one little nick. And you focused on that. And now you've distorted the whole reality. Everyone looks at that person based on that one little spot. The way we're going to judge you now, the midah keneged midah, that one little spot, your whole body is going to become tameh. Which now explains the Chafetz Chaim's questions. Are you all covered? So that should be worse. No. If you're all covered, it's a skin disease. It's not, because that doesn't send the message. The message, it has to be one little spot. It can't be the whole body covered. The whole body covered is not a reflection of the Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara has to be the quid pro quo, the midah keneged midah has one spot. That's affecting the whole body. That's the message the person has to understand. This is what I did wrong. That's what I did wrong. The Chafetz Chaim tells us, it's a very scary thing. He says when a person is about to be born, they give a ruling, how many words will this person say in his lifetime? Our number is there. The choice we have, how are we going to use these words? The number is not going to expand. The number is there. How are you going to use these words? The birds that we bring, one for the negative speech, we understand. You spoke negative, you need to bring a bird as atonement. But you also have to bring a bird for the positive speech. Because by using your words in a negative, you know what you've done as well? Now you have less words that could be used for positive. The message for us as parents and educators is such an incredible message. I happen to have the honor of spending one Pesach with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Anybody goes online and listens to him every once in a while, he has some beautiful insights. He says he remembers the day clearly because it happened on 9/11, that a nun, the head nun of a parish nearby, wanted to schedule a meeting with him. At the time, he was the chief rabbi of Great Britain. It's fine. He meets with people from all different backgrounds, religions. And she comes and they start talking theology and philosophy. And he says, "Listen, what are you doing here? Why are you here?" She said that in her parish there's a school that in the last few years went from 1,200 students to 600 students. And it's become so toxic, the environment. The parents are complaining about the teachers, and the teachers are complaining about the parents, and the students, and the administration. It's just all negative, all toxic. What can we do? How do we correct this? So he said to her, you have to start now to change that culture. Look for anything, could be the smallest thing in the world. Start celebrating accomplishments. Anything. Right? The kid who usually drags the chair across, when he slides it back in, if he picked it up and put it in, make a party. Start celebrating and gifting and giving prizes and just making people feel good about the positive things that they do. That's the only way to change this. A year and a half later, she comes back to meet with him. And she says, we've up to 75% from when I met with you last. We started doing it. It's had incredible impact. So I've given out a lot of Belgian chocolates. It's cost us some money in terms of the prizes, but it's had an incredible impact. The point that he was making is that both as parents, we have to start figuring out what we can celebrate, what we can be positive about. Being positive, that pushes away the negative. Being positive pushes away the negative, and the message, I think the birds is a message of, and when we are negative, not only is the impact, the negative impact that is felt by being negative, but it's the loss of what could have been felt if we were positive. That bird that comes because of positive speech is for the potential that was lost because it wasn't utilized correctly. And I think there's the opportunity cost that is there. It's not easy. We get frustrated. We work all day. We have to start figuring out what the positive. It's a lot easier to just pick on the negatives. Loshon Hara is the easiest thing in the world to do. It is easy. I always give the example, you've got the kid in the class that got the pimple on the nose. It's easy to point. It's easy to find the pimple. Right? Everyone stares at the nose. It's the easiest thing to do. Our job is not easy. It's figuring out what the positive things are, what the positive attributes, what can be highlighted. That's the only way to counteract the effects of Loshon Hara. The effects of Loshon Hara is you create a toxic environment. You've taken any positive attribute, now everyone looks at it as bad. Because you have reframed the way people look at someone. And it doesn't have to be a person. It could be a community. It could be a shul. It could be a school. Loshon Hara has an effect of changing or distorting reality about any entity. Every relationship is governed by the same thing, no matter what the constituent is. Positive, build a relationship. Negative, you'll make it toxic and you'll end up destroying it. And it's so easy to be critical. So that's the message we have. We have what to work on. I think we've answered all the questions, right? Why Loshon Hara is worse than Motzi Shemra. Motzi Shemra can be fought. Loshon Hara, it's hard. The person's using truth against you. It's out of context. Fighting context is a lot more difficult than fighting falsehood. And the opposite, the way to fight it is, let's start figuring out where we can use positive speech. Doesn't mean flattery. I'm not saying flattery or make stuff up. And that's easy to do too, and that also is not a healthy thing. It's figuring out where the positive things to celebrate, where the positive things to identify, and we will make ourselves better people, our families will be more successful, institutions, and we'll make the world a better world.